it's a job? That's the first question I get asked. It's been my job since 2016 as a full-time speaker, but also I'm the founder of a business called Forging People. Now, Forging People works on human-centered people development, and Forging People came from a line in my talk that we either let our adversities and our challenges define us negatively for the rest of our days, or we choose to allow them to forge something better, to forge something powerful that never existed without you going through that adversity at the time. It kind of all makes sense then. And actually, that's one of those times we're going through right now. So what I want to talk to you about today, I've got like half an hour to talk about this, so on a whistle-stop tour, is I want to give you like a lived experience perspective on things that you can do to kind of manage your anxiety, but also to boost your well-being and positive mental health. Things that you could do every day, even if you are in the tightest of lockdown situations. The important thing to stress that it comes from a lived experience perspective. So there's a disclaimer wrapped up in that. I'm not a medical professional. What I share is experience. What I share is insight and learnings of my journey from mental illness, namely obsessive compulsive disorder, into a teen and adult life, generalized anxiety disorder, and onto a breakdown around 7 years ago, and actually that was where the best things started to happen to me. So GAD is a great place to start, actually, because it's kind of less commonly known, but more common. And actually, some signs of GAD could be that you constantly assume a negative outcome to things. Very easy to do at the moment. You could catastrophize all of your pursuits. It could be that you seek your accountability and your value in other people's opinions. It's that old people-pleasing thing. Could be that you stay on that hamster wheel of anxiety, and as soon as one thing stops, the next thing kicks in and you just don't stop. But the same kind of energy, that nervous energy it kind of generates, can either destroy us or it can put us forward and there's a catalyst for positive change as well. So I always say that the best things that have ever happened to me have come from my worst experiences. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that stuff that happens along the way. And one of those times is right now. So I think the first thing for me is I started to apply my kind of old recovery process and actually use it in a position where we are in terms of coronavirus and home working and lockdown, lots of different things. And the first thing is to acknowledge that this is not only unprecedented, but also it's brutal in lots of different ways. There's no kind of dressing that up or getting around that, acknowledging that it's brutal. And I think that's actually the biggest and most important step for people to do, because a lot of people right now are masking how they're feeling, masking how their business is doing, and lots of different things. It's very easy to try and put a spin on things when we don't acknowledge the reality of actually what's going on. But tied in with that is the assumption element, which I'll come on to shortly. Once we go past the phase of kind of accepting what's going on and acknowledging that words like furlough that never existed in my world 5 weeks ago, I'm sure I'm not alone in that, suddenly become mainstay, kind of like Brexit, but I'm not going to go down that avenue either, so don't worry. But these things happen, these things that no one ever foresaw, and we're right in the middle of that now. What can we do? So once we get past that acknowledgement of the fact that this is brutal and unprecedented, everything else, is we go into survival mode. Now, some of you may have gone past survival mode now, and most people that I speak to in terms of audiences or clients are either in survival mode or evolution mode or somewhere between the two. Now, survival mode is kind of asking yourselves the questions, financially, can I get through this? Look, my business is public events, private events, all of them in person. Overnight, the business is wiped out. You'll always get brutal honesty from me. Overnight, the business is wiped out. However, that being said, due to the way that I position the business in a good year and stuff, I know I've got a certain amount of grace, a certain amount of buffer zone that I could be okay. And actually, once I acknowledge that, I can start to make decisions that were not based on a position of fear. And all of you have got your own individual challenges. They say that we're all in this together, which provides some kind of peace of mind, but also could be quite overwhelming to think that as well. Because actually there's no Superman to come out and raise us above everything else. But everyone does have their unique challenges, whether you're a frontline worker or whether you're a vulnerable person staying at home, you all have unique challenges. So survival mode is this, is can we survive? Can we get through this, the structure of that? So making sure that you apply for the mortgage breaks, the loan repayment holidays, everything else. in terms of your business and kind of your career is actually, what does that look like? Actually take away the emotion of what's going on and look at the reality, look at the process of that. Now, for me, I'm quite happy and quite strong at the minute, which sounds a little bit weird to say that, but what I mean is I'm living in an old anxiety mechanism. Because anxiety to me, and you'll find this with yourselves as well, a lot of anxiety comes from regret from the past or fear of the future. Very rarely is it today, and actually now more than ever, we're kind of living in a permanent Groundhog Day of in that kind of reality that we're cutting off today, we're cutting off tomorrow, cutting off yesterday, and living in today. So that's survival mode, is can we survive, and how long can we survive for? Then once we move past survival mode, we then go into evolution mode. Now, evolution mode can actually be a little bit exciting. That's the bit where we're trying to pivot, to reposition, whether it be in terms of business, the way we communicate. It's making people realize that we really underestimated the true value of being able to do what we want in terms of going out places and seeing people, seeing family, seeing loved ones. But again, weirdly, it's kind of in that phase, in the evolution phase, that we could be creating a new reality here, because the truth is probably that things will never go back to the way they were before because of those reasons, both negatively and positively. We're creating a new way of doing things like this, for example, could be the new norm. And I think that, leading on nicely, we're never assuming is kind of a huge step when we look to conquer anxiety in any format, but especially kind of where we are now. Mark Twain said some of the worst things in my life never actually happened. Kind of how true is that? We create anxiety in the thought of doing something, but not the doing it, weirdly. So if you look at public speaking, according to Harvard, the public speaking is a bigger fear than death, that we fear ridicule more than we do dying. So that's kind of like a real human flaw that we're faced against. So the problem comes with the assumption that when I step up and speak, when I do this, that people are going to hate me or judge me or dismiss me or not love me, and all those kind of different things go through our heads. So we create anxiety before we even get into the moment. And you've got those situations every single day. But even now, you've got those situations going on where you're creating an assumed outcome to things. If the world's greatest minds don't know what's going on in terms of what the end date looks like, even when the end date's going to be, who are we to take a stab at that? And I think therein lies the problem, that we all try and think, especially for people in the business community especially, we all try and work with the bigger picture, with the end in mind. We can't do that right now. So it does force you into that Groundhog Day of thinking, but actually that could be your superpower, being able to make sure that you focus solely on the day. And that's kind of what I'm going to go into, and how we can safeguard that. So the first thing I want to talk about is setting boundaries. Now, setting boundaries is massive in life and business generally, and being clear with other people about what your boundaries are. We will quite happily fill up our diaries with all of our work stuff and then go home and fill our rest of our diary up with all our family stuff and home stuff. But where do we feature in our own lives? Where do you feature in your own life? That when I work with clients now, in terms of as a speaker or a trainer, whatever that may be, that I see the signs of burnout and breakdown and lots of different things so easily, even though I didn't see it happening to me. I see it so clearly in other people. And the reason they get to that point is because of that. They don't prioritize, don't diarize the recovery time every single day. And right now, I bet you're feeling more tired at the end of every day than you would if you were going out into the world and coming back. It's crazy. We've all got that underlying anxiety, that underlying that dread, that fear going on to different levels. And that will eat our energy constantly and consistently. So scheduling recovery is really important. I'll come on to that later on. But the other reason that people don't reach the position of burnout or breakdown is because they do wear the mask, that they try and cover exactly what's going on. So setting boundaries is one of the best ways right now to actually make sure that you safeguard your kind of own mental health and protect that with everything you've got, ring fence that. So I'm actually naturally, weirdly, for what I do, I'm an introvert by nature. So I recharge in my own company, which for me is a true definition of being an introvert. An extrovert recharges in the company of others. So if you have an extrovert that's living on their own right now, the struggle is actually to keep that communication, and I'll come on to that. For an introvert, actually, I'm quite happy doing this, but I still need to have that reach out. You still reach that tipping point. There's knowing where you lie on that scale. So one of the first boundaries that I think is worth mentioning is to keep a routine. Is to keep a routine. So I've been getting up at like 6 in the morning, even though I haven't had to. Actually, I didn't even get up 6 before. I get up at 6 in the morning just so I can actually feel like I'm going forward into the day with some positive intent. So have a little bit of a routine going on. So coffee, breakfast, shower, exercise, whatever that may be. And even weirdly, I'm not sure if you've tried this recently, but if you put a splash of perfume on or a splash of aftershave, you kind of feel a bit fresher, like you're actually doing something, especially if it's like a family quiz night on a Friday night or something. You kind of feel like you're putting together something that's special. So for me, it's going forward into the day, and that's the best thing. That's the best place to start. I'll send a link to anybody who wants this, but there's an American naval commander who did a commencement speech on the importance of making your bed. An amazing talk. What he's saying was that you feel like you've achieved something straight away if you make your bed, but also it's the last place you come back to at the end of the day, so you have a nice made bed to come back to. So taking that a step further, at the moment, it'd be very easy to kind of work in our pajamas or pants. Trust me, I've seen it all on Zoom calls recently. It's crazy. But if we actually purposely get dressed and get ready, we feel like we're going into the day with the best that we have. Very simple mindset shift that really does work. But again, I relate that to kind of my mental health challenges, that if I didn't go forward into the day with intent, by default, I wouldn't be living a life on my terms. Because the default is you live a life on somebody else's terms, especially if you live with other people. So that's the first thing about kind of safeguarding, is make sure you have that great routine to start with. So the next boundary I want to talk about is, where am I? It's time. So I've been using my working week. So the 9 to 5, for example, Monday to Friday, even though I haven't had like the workload to justify that, I've still been doing that. And if it hasn't, and it's got busy again now, but to start with, when it wasn't there, I was working on the bigger picture stuff. All that stuff that when I've been flying or traveling places to gigs and stuff, thinking, I wish I had more time. I didn't wish for a pandemic, but I wish I had more time. Started to do all that bigger picture stuff, to actually work on personal development, professional development, get the business stuff back in place, pivot and take as much stuff online as possible. Again, in the freelance world, we've done a lot of that recently. But the 9 to 5, make sure that's protected, because it would have been very easy not to. It would be very easy not to do anything. And I think then, there's two elements to this, but then you feel that when we come through this, that you won't be better for the experience, where potentially you could come through smarter, stronger, and happier if you apply your time correctly. The other element to this is, if you feel the need to relax and recharge and to rest, just don't feel guilty about that as well. I speak all over the world on this stuff, and we've got a real problem in the UK with self-care and self-awareness, because we think it's selfish. And actually, we need to protect ourselves. So if we feel that we're having a real tough time, recharge, relax, and rest up, wherever that means to you. But take away the guilt of feeling that too. So the next boundary to set is your working space. So I have an office in central Bristol, for those who know Bristol, just off of Park Street. However, I can't go there right now. So I have a home office. I can't even go there because my wife is now working from home. So I've been booted out on the lowest of the pecking order. Dining room table. That means that I'm working in the same space as I live and I relax. That's not a really good place to be. So the kind of, in terms of a mindset shift, at the end of the day, I pack everything away, the banners, the paperwork, the laptop, everything, the cameras and lighting and stuff all goes away. And then that means that when I'm sat down relaxing, I don't get that reminder of work, or I don't get that urge to work till all hours of the night, which is very easily done. So again, just a very simple shift is to kind of ring fence your workspace as well. The next thing could be quite sensitive, but I think it's worth mentioning that we need to set boundaries with our relationships. Look, I'm guessing that you live with the people that you live with because you love them, or did, or something like that. But we've never had that kind of intensity of being in each other's faces for so long, for a prolonged period of time. Now, it could get quite fractured, quite edgy. A lot of people are making a lot of bad choices from a position of fear right now, generally. So it's important to make sure you set boundaries for that, especially if you have like children in the house as well. You need that space to yourself to make sure that you are recharged to go again tomorrow as well. But also having the courage, is the right word, the courage to speak to your family, to say, I need this, just like they need their own space as well. and trying to protect that. But that'd be quite a sensitive conversation to have, but definitely one to do, to make sure that every single day you have that own space that we all need. It's healthy to have your own space, but very difficult when we're in lockdown mode. So again, have those conversations. Next one I want to talk about is very simple. It's to move. I'm not sure about you guys, but again, I've kind of been sat at Zoom for most of the day. So I've tried to take things onto my phone where possible, so I can walk around the house, or when the sun was out, I could walk around the garden. Just take as much as you can to move as much as possible. I have an alarm on my phone to get up every hour just to remind me, because it's so easy to go into laptop mode. To get a glass of water from the kitchen, walk around, drink some water, sit down again. Just a very simple movement elements actually change your state, change your physical state, but it also changes your mental state as well. You know how you feel if you've been sat down for so long, your energy will dip. If I'm delivering a keynote in front of even thousands of people, I've delivered keynotes kind of like Excel London when it wasn't a hospital, and it's important for me after half an hour to get everybody on their feet. And that means that the energy changes. You can see the energy of the room change because people stand up and they change their energy. Sit back down, they still feel energized. So that works the same with you. It's a move. Movement's really, really important. So the exercise thing, depending on where you live in your situation, sometimes we can get out and walk and run and walk the dog and lots of different things. But sometimes we need to improvise. And obviously we have things like the YouTube channel for people like Joe Wicks and stuff, that if you want to do some workouts from home too, that's always an option. For me, but it's always an option. So the next one is really important, and it's one that's really this really triggers me in a way that I look out for people twice. And what I mean by this is to stay connected, because it tends to me, the people that tend to slip through the cracks are the people that you need to ask twice if they're okay, and it's the people that you don't hear from that really we need to reach out to, because it's the people that could be struggling right now, because of that lack of connection. Look, I'm 6'4", like 20-odd stone bloke. I'm very huggy. I'm like a bear. I love kind of hugs. I'm missing that personal contact. This is as good as it gets right now, and I'm good with that. However, people do miss that interaction. They do miss that connection, and even though we can get that through Zoom and through lots of different things, make sure that you make yourself kind of accessible. But also, if you're struggling right now, make sure you do reach out to somebody. I'm a mental health champion for Time to Change, for Mental Health UK, lots of different organisations, trade organisations and things. I'm very good at actively signposting, and it's an important part to kind of say right now that if somebody comes to you because they're struggling right now, unless you are a medical professional, that's the caveat, then they're not coming to you to be fixed. Essentially in life, people just want to be heard and understood. And if we can fulfill those two things, they will most of the time find their own way forward. So the best thing we can do for other people is to get very good at how to signpost people to the help and support that they would need. And that's our only responsibility. And I think for me, that takes the burden off of people when we feel that the inherently human need to try and fix people. So I do a lot of work with call centres and big groups of people. Most of my work's done with HR directors and things. And most of the challenges now is interesting because the phase has changed. To start with, it was the kind of the ground troops that I was speaking to most. They were the biggest challenges. The biggest challenges now are with people that are in a position of responsibility. So it could be the team leaders, the line managers, mental health first aiders, basically anyone with the position of trust within the company for other people, because you have that thing that who looks after people that looks after people. Most of the time, the reason why we get into a position where we're looking after groups of people is because we have a passion to help people. Most of the time it's because, for example, mental health first aiders, most of the time it's because we've had experiences of mental health challenges ourselves. So we want to step up and help other people so they don't have to go what we went through. The problem with that is that makes us more sensitive to the challenges of other people, and be very easy to take those burdens on ourselves, especially from a perspective of being an employer or a line manager or a team manager. You have a collective responsibility, and that will be very easily transferred onto you as well. So again, just a little kind of flag on that one is who looks after the people that looks after people. Sharing your challenges has always been a very big thing for me. It's speaking was, and it was my therapy, it was my recovery, and still is my therapy. I will stand up in front of thousands of people and actually say exactly what's on my mind right now. And I was chatting to Ellie about this beforehand. It's a mechanism I use called disarming truth. And it's not something we should be really afraid of. We're really afraid to be vulnerable, but once we practice vulnerability daily, it becomes our superpower. Not only because people don't have anything over us, but also because everything's just out there. People can see exactly what you're about. And the problem is, if we don't share our challenges, if you're not showing the world your true self, how does the world know how to help you? And I think that's the problem. We kind of bottle things up, we keep things, and not exclusively, but especially men. That's a real big challenge for men to talk about this kind of stuff. So by sharing your challenges, we can really start to kind of break down some barriers. And again, especially right now, there's a lot of power in sharing your challenges. And in the same breath, that disarming truth mechanism I mentioned, I will stand up in front of it. I said my opening line for most talks in terms of a big keynote is that I use this thing called disarming truth. It's where I tell you what's on my mind right now, because when I tell you, it's out of me and onto you. You know you're going to get vulnerability and authenticity. Then, by human need, they're gonna support me to deliver my talk. But then, from my point of view, when we look at our problems and our challenges from a third-party perspective, then actually it changes everything. It becomes a lot more manageable. You can see it for what it is. It's when we keep stuff up here and ruminate and then kind of firefighting kind of mode, that's when we really start to have those challenges. We don't see an end to it. I run things called speaking academies for emotional storytelling. So it's not kind of presentation skills, it's very much emotional storytelling. And one of the most powerful exercises I encourage you to try is to think of your biggest adversity, your biggest challenge that you've ever faced, and actually write it down from an audience perspective. Not that you may ever deliver that, but you will see the value in the experience that you've gained through that. So when I deliver my keynote talk, Talking Anxiety, it's very little about me. It's like 15 minutes about my story, but then 45 minutes of insights and learnings and experience that I can share with an audience. It means that they can benefit from my experiences without going through that themselves. We've all had those adversities. We've all had those challenges. The next one is sleep. Again, I'm not sure if this was an audience, I'd be asking for show of hands and stuff, but sleep patterns are a bit weird right now. Because we're just doing things differently, whether we're sat down a lot, so therefore we're not burning up as much energy from a physical point of view. It could be anxiety that's kind of troubling you. That sleep is so important in terms of our physical and mental health. I mean, after years of getting by maybe 3 or 4 hours because my anxiety wouldn't allow me to do that, I've realised the power of that in the past 6 or 7 years. And it's crazy the impact it has, a positive impact a decent night's sleep has on you. A great kind of brain hack, I use this thing called brain hacks. It's lots of tools that I use to try and help people. So brain hacks are basically, here's one for sleep. If you struggle to sleep because your kind of mind's firefighting at 2 minutes past 4 in the morning, actually your brain's not telling you at 2 minutes past 4 to do something now. It's reminding you not to forget to do it in the morning. So the best way of putting that to bed, pardon the pun, is to get up and write it on paper, what's going through your head. And actually when you lie back down, your brain switches off. It's a really weird dynamic shift, but your brain switches off because you've then acknowledged what's going through your head. So if you have things like insomnia and problems sleeping, then please do try that. At the very least, it's kind of a really powerful exercise to try, just to get stuff out of your head and onto paper. You see things truly for what they are. So the next is engage wisely. Any Star Trek fans in here? Big hero of mine, Jean-Luc Picard, Next Generation. His thing is to engage. We'll make all these plans and we'll have lots of conversations, I'm sure, and lots of calls and meetings and things, but make sure you engage wisely. Now more than ever, most of us are feeling a lot more sensitive and a lot more vulnerable right now on every front. So actually the engagements that we have, the conversations that we have with people, it could be the chats you have with family or friends, make sure that they're actually ones that make you thrive and not actually diminish you even further. This reflection time has been amazing from a perspective of taking a step back from life and working out who's good for me, what's good for me, and actually seeing things for a little bit more for what they are. And we probably won't get this chance again and hopefully ever in that sense, but we could use this time to really reflect on what life is like afterwards. All the stuff that I'm doing now, including the business stuff, so all the online products are not being built to replace anything in person, they're being built to complement. And we could take that into our personal lives as well. These new habits, these new skills that we're developing, actually it's not to replace anything that you do, it's to amplify your voice once you get out of this situation. So engaging wisely is really important. And I'm not sure about you, again, but I mean, I have a family quiz night every Friday now, and I literally, it's the most I've ever spoken to my family. So it's actually brought us closer together. It's taken a pandemic to get us closer together. But it's interesting that we've put a lot more emphasis on maintaining good relationships now. And even though you see the kind of the negative stories and stuff, there seems to be a lot more community rising out of this as well, both in terms of professionally and personally, of course. And the final point I want to kind of mention before I open it up to questions, if you have any, is about recovery. And I mentioned this briefly earlier on. Recovery with a small r, I like to call it. So recovery, not the big recovery, I mean the small recovery, where the daily process is how do you recover every day? Now, some of that will be in your makeup in terms of whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. There were two different ways of recharging. So kind of pre-zombie apocalypse, that part of my mechanisms of recovering and basically that proactive recovery throughout the day as well. So if I had a speaking engagement in the day, I would use my traveling time getting there to make sure I kind of play music's really powerful, play music that lifts me, gets my energy up. So before I get on stage, I will not sit down because again, it takes the energy out as soon as you stop walking around. And then I get up on stage and I give it all I got. Now, interestingly, on stage, it's not speaking skills, it's not stage skills, it's basically anxiety mechanisms. That I talk with my hands because that nervous energy goes out from my hands. I walk around because actually it gets nervous energy out of me. Trust me, it's not skill, it's just basically staying alive. It's amazing. But there's a lot of egos in speaking, that's what I like to share the truth. But afterwards, to avoid that boom and bust mentality, I will play kind of more quieter music, calmer music to bring my state back down again. Because if I don't do that, and you've all got versions of this in your lives as well, personally and professionally, if we don't do that, we can only go for so long before we stop. If we don't recharge on a daily basis, you eke closer towards that kind of burnout and breakdown mentality. Most of the top three industries that I work in for that element is financial services, law, and construction. Those three industries are huge in terms of the work that I do around those elements, about the recovery and resilience element. We cannot control the uncontrollable. That's where we are right now. We cannot control the uncontrollable. However, the pursuit of trying to, and it includes other people, by the way, other people in situations, but the pursuit of trying to control the uncontrollable will create further anxiety. So some real human flaws in here. But daily recovery could be the fact that you just simply do something that you love to do. It could be, so some of the questions I ask, if this was kind of like a full keynote, would be, what did you want to be as a kid? What was that job that you wanted to do as a kid? Like, have a proper think back, the one that you're really emotionally connected to. And trust me, I've heard it all, I think. Some really weird people out there, that's what I'm going to say. However, it's not thinking about the job that you wanted to do, but the emotion attached to it. Because most of the time when I ask that question, heads will go up and people just start to look up and smile for the first time in a long time. They're thinking about something that was purely them before real life got in the way. So one of the most common answers I get is an astronaut, but actually the job of being an astronaut is rubbish. You get trained for 5 to 10 years to get shot up into the sky for a week, shot back down at a very high speed with a high risk of death. Fancy applying for that? Not so much. However, if you think about the job of an astronaut through the eyes of a teenager, you've got discovery and travel and excitement and adventure. You definitely go for that. So before anybody worries I'm trying to convince people to change jobs, I'm not. It's about bringing those feelings, those emotions into your hobbies now. Bringing those things into your pastime. You'll know those things that you connect to, really even forgetting about. In Christmas, I was playing, my nephew had Lego for Christmas, and I still love Lego, forgotten all about it. And I just had that kind of spark of like, oh, I used to love this stuff. It's kind of adults, we don't really bring that back into our lives once real life gets in the way, and like mortgages had to be paid and kids had to be fed and lots of different things. But think about that. Think about that job that you wanted to do. Think about what you were about before all of those things. It's really fascinating what you kind of find out. And finally on this front is, what do you love to do? Now this is interesting. And I have heard some really, I used to ask this question to an audience, what do you love to do when no one's looking? Some really weird answers. Never do a gig in Germany, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, so what do you love to do? And actually that forms a pivotal part of what you are about and how you recover. The stuff that you love. I love country music. Country music's my thing. Can go both ways. As fans of Morrissey and the Smiths, although testy, that's kind of, can take you either way. But music is really powerful. It can shift your state. So what do you love to do? And if you're not diarising that, if you're not bringing that into your everyday life, you need to bring that in and give your soul that little bit of a lift right now. It's exactly what you need to do. And music is very powerful as well, for just depending on what music you like, of course, it can lift your state. But speaking of music, and to bring it to a close, I always like to finish on a country music quote, one that's not about losing your dog or your missus. This one is, every storm runs out of rain. I love that, especially right now. It's very easy to think that this storm will go on forever. It won't. Every problem has an end date. We just don't know what it is yet. We don't see what the end looks like and when it's going to be. But every storm does run out of rain. And the problem is that when we lose hope, or the hope of something better, for me, that's when it got dangerous. That's when it gets dangerous. It's when we get to that point. So if it's you, know that every storm does run out of rain. But if it's somebody coming to you, know that it could be the only time they ever decide to open up to anybody about anything. So our responsibility, remember, is not to fix people. But actually, it's just to actively signpost, to truly listen to them and actively signpost. And that's where our responsibility ends. So if you're in a position where you have people that you work with, make sure that you do make yourself accessible. And if it's just you or any of your people, that I'm really happy to speak to anybody who just wants to chat, then I'm always here as well. Honestly, it's a genuine offer, not a throwaway line, that you should never, ever feel that you're alone. So I'm going to leave it there. That's me. Thank you very much for listening to me, and really happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. I've got a question come in actually through message. So do you have any advice for staying focused and keeping productive whilst working at home? I think the maintaining the working hours really helps, because it keeps you focused. And even in normal times, the two biggest anxiety triggers in the UK business community are procrastination and change. Change is inevitable. So actually, the more we get good with this, the better. Procrastination, not so much. And actually right now, it'd be very easy to procrastinate. I'll do that tomorrow. That'd be cool. And actually, how much bigger and hairier and scarier does it seem tomorrow than when you're doing it right now? So I think the best tip on that is to avoid procrastination. If there's something you can do now, just do it. A lot of the reasons we procrastinate with things is because we don't want to do it. Let's be honest. Either we don't want to do it, it seems too scary, or we make ourselves vulnerable by doing it and put that out there for kind of questioning. So if we can overcome that, then procrastination and getting rid of procrastination really help with homeworking right now. So another question come in. A lot of my anxiety is underlying and non-circumstantial. Do you have any advice on how I could identify the root causes? Thank you so much for the question. This is a fascinating one, actually, because a lot of the stuff that, obviously you don't know my backstory, and honestly, that's not enough time for that right now. But however, that a lot of my kind of backstory, I didn't realise, didn't recognise, didn't know until I'd actually started to work on myself through lots of different things, through counselling, lots of different things. So it's amazing what we carry with us. I use this kind of question that says, we have all the answers, we just don't ask ourselves the right questions. So in answer to this question, I think that one of the best exercises you can do, and I would recommend this to anybody, I believe that everything that we do and everything we're about should be open to our own questioning. We have this kind of really kind of worrying habit of putting something from a belief, from a value to a pure belief where it becomes unquestionable. And we can, so mine, for example, was a few years ago, when I lose weight, I'll start running. Now, if I started running a few years ago, I would have lost weight, but I told myself enough for that to become true and believable, and I believe myself. So in answer to this question, try this tomorrow. When you wake up tomorrow morning, think about everything, not just what you're doing, but in terms of how you speak to yourself, your narrative. So the first thing would be to question why you do things. Why do you get up at that time? Could you do with more sleep or less sleep? Why do you wake up next to them is maybe a question you haven't asked in a while. But again, everything should be open to questioning. Why do you have that for breakfast? Does it nourish you? Does it deplete you? A lot of the time we run on habit, and a lot of the time those habits are not necessarily constructive. They may not be damaging, but they're not constructive. From a narrative point of view, if you're not feeling life right now, or if you're feeling anxious in this instance, then we can start to ask ourselves, actually, what language are we using with ourselves? So I was speaking on a BBC panel event with a psychologist going back about 18 months ago now, and he was saying that, this has kind of really spooked me, to be honest. He was saying, if you're not feeling life right now and you say to yourself, I am rubbish, then yeah, that's you. You're speaking in the first person. That's definitely your confidence and how you're feeling, definitely. The scary thing is that most of the time we will speak to ourselves in the third person and say to ourselves, you are rubbish. Now, the scary thing about that is that that's what somebody else has told you, and they've told you that long enough for it to become your conditioning. So I know that anxiety for me, interestingly, if I think about my 3 biggest challenges in adult life, I could trace each one of them back to childhood. And I think most of us are in that kind of boat once we start to think about it. But if you think about anxiety, I have a family history of high anxiety. Most of my family, from a learned behavior point of view, has that as well. Again, it's a learned behavior, not intentionally, of course, but learned behavior. You look at weight and weight loss, that in between, as much as I love them and I miss them every day, in between feeding me rounds of sandwiches and stuff, my grandparents have said, he's a big lad, he loves his food. And I'm a big lad, I love my food. And I built a bloody brand on it now as well. So it's constant reinforcement. So actually, that's why it's been hard to break down that conditioning. And the third one, and I'm quite open about this, is that I've got a bad relationship with alcohol. But when I think to my kind of family history, again, it's the same situation. So now I understand, but it's easily overlooked. Unless we start to ask ourselves those questions, it's easily overlooked. So I think we have the answers in answer to your question. We just need to start to be honest with ourselves. Okay. How can you communicate to someone how you are feeling if they don't understand about mental health or what you are feeling or going through? An amazing question, which I wish I had a better answer to. The challenge we have is the closer we are to somebody, the more impossible it is to help them. And it works both ways, of course. And the challenge is context. So for example, if it's like you're my brother or my sister or wife or husband, they see you as a different relationship in life. They don't see you as a potential solution. The context isn't the same. And so rightly or wrongly, they think that you have a different agenda. And this seems to be the way that they were hardwired to think. The best way to approach these things in both ways, to you or to the other person, is conversationally. So again, that is a really common question I get asked a lot. And I give out handouts, it kind of talks and stuff. The best way is just like leave the handout in front of them and just let them ask in their own right, or to mention, I saw this guy today talking about that. Oh, what do you think? He said this. What do you think? Bring it up conversationally, so actually you empower the other person as opposed to trying to take that off of somebody, if you see what I mean. But that is a massively difficult thing to do, to help somebody that you're close to, but also for them to help you. Because as you said, they may not have the understanding of where you're coming from. And actually, nobody really has the understanding of where any of us comes from. We all have unique experiences or combination of experiences. So I believe the best way is to do it conversationally, if that helps at all. That is a big question. And if you need a bigger answer, then please do let me know. Thank you. Okay, how can people stop judging themselves and being too harsh on themselves? So again, great question. This comes with resilience. I think this comes with the reinforcement of self-belief and self-awareness. So if somebody says something to you, for example, then we have an option of thinking, well, it's just their opinion. There's a Polish proverb that goes, not my circus, not my monkeys. I love that. So actually a lot of people create this whole drama, this whole circus, and actually it's not us at all. It's completely about where they are right now. However, in terms of ourselves, I think it's very easy to think negatively. So I do a lot of work with an organization, and they did a survey that 82% of us are wired to think negatively. So in the UK, so any given situation, we're wired to look for fear, for danger. Probably explains where we are right now, to be honest. But so we always assume the negative. So we take those same rules to ourselves as well. We'll quite easily overlook our successes to get to our failures. I guarantee you, if I'm doing a workshop, for example, and there's 49 positive pieces of feedback and 1 negative, guess which one we focus on? I think so. There's an element of we need to make sure that we're checking the facts and not the emotion attached to that or the belief attached to that. And I hope that answers your question. I like what you said about procrastinating. I'm finding it hard to manage when no one else is around and working alone. Any tips on how to avoid procrastination and to stop doing it? Wow. So again, this is a big question. For me, I'm currently, if I'm being honest, I'm currently driven by the thought that if I stop, I may get forgotten. And that's not just in a business sense. I mean, in every single sense that I think for me, I've now associated in that kind of daily routine of making sure I'm keeping, like a dynamo, keeping the momentum up. And actually, I don't want that to drop. And actually, that does become self-fulfilling because you do get used to that routine. So that helps. I know that, who was it? There was somebody famous. If you want me to quote on it, just let me know who the source is later. They were saying they always act. Oh, no, it was Ranulph Fiennes. He always says he does things and acts, and what keeps him going is thinking about he's got his two loved ones over the shoulder. So actually, he's kind of, that spurs him on to drive harder, to keep going, to not do stuff. I mean, even in that life and death situation, that's his kind of motivator. He always thinks of his two most loved ones next to him, overlooking over his shoulder, and actually seeing if he's doing a good thing or not, a good job or not. So I hope that helps you. So that's the end of the questions I've got on the chat. Look, I'm going to pop my details in if you need to reach out directly. Look, given the sensitivity of the subject, I appreciate why a lot of kind of open questions, and even right now you may not be knowing what that question looks like. So please do reach out to me. I'm going to pop that in now. So if you need to reach out to me, please do. I'm always happy to hear from people anyway. I've got a YouTube channel with lots of different videos on resilience and recovery and lots of different things around that. But yeah, big thank you for listening to my open therapy session. Now comes the introverted sigh and a sip. And we're good. Thank you so much. It's really nice to meet you all. Thank you.